Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
We are joined today by a very well-known face to most of you, if not all of you. Author, host of his own wildly successful podcast, The Taylor Marshall Show. Father of 8, if that's right, is it, Dr. Taylor? And husband to Joy, if I'm right there. Taylor Marshall, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We thought we'd start with a question about your own work. I've been reading what you've written and listening to what you've been saying online for a number of years, and have seen your growth in popularity. We set up just a couple of years ago and have been quite surprised by where the Spirit has kind of directed us, in a sense, because sometimes our own plans has gone by the wayside, and we found ourselves sort of providentially moved in places we didn't expect. So I suppose my first question is, why did you set up your own podcast? What was your aim, and what have the results been so far?
Well, I first started podcasting all the way back in 2006. That was the year I became a Catholic. And this was when podcasts were on the iPod, which was an Apple device that the young people may not remember. And no one knew what it was, and it was not very popular. And I continued to do that until about 2012 or 13. And then at that point, YouTube was pretty big and established. And I decided, well, I'll just start everything I do that I'm talking on an audio format. I'll just put a webcam on, and do the same thing, but with the face and with some images and maybe some Bible verses or something like that. So that's how it all started. And then over time it grew to more interviews, and really around 2018 is when I started doing more. Instead of just doing philosophy and theology, I was doing current events, church events, some American politics, et cetera. And honestly, I've been doing it since 2006. And, I think people listen when there's a voice that resonates with something already in their head or already in their heart. And, especially up until about 2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot of Catholic content. Maybe 5, major podcasts or channels. Now there's a lot of them. So, it's just people are looking for truth. And in the crisis in our church right now, people are looking for something that's going to feed them, that's something that's orthodox, something that's tapped into, historic Catholic philosophy, theology, literature, etc. And unfortunately, they don't always find it in their parish or in their diocese. And so this is, especially since, the pandemic, more and more people have discovered online resources, and that's where we're at.
So like a lot of people would say that you're the most influential Catholic podcaster. Would you agree with that description, Taylor? And how does that play out for you? Have you got like lots of people coming to you with information? How do you discern what to repeat to people and that sort of thing?
I do get a lot of people talk to me and send me information, and sometimes breaking information, but I usually don't break it. I usually let others break it and then have some commentary on it, just so that I don't break something wrong, because sometimes I'm worried I'm fed something wrong. And then also I just want to protect sources. But it does give me time. I'd rather chew on it and meditate on it and look at different angles on something rather than be the first. So maybe someone gets the clicks for breaking something, but I'd rather deliver something that's quality and thoughtful rather than just give you the news.
I know you've been to the Vatican, and you managed to give Pope Francis your book, didn't you? Infiltration. Do you get anyone from the Vatican in touch with you, or is it just mainly people from the US?
I do. Yeah, I get contact from cardinals, archbishops, bishops, every once in a while. It happens more it's funny, it happens more in Europe than it does in America, where a bishop will say, "Hey, you're Taylor Marshall, aren't you?" I'll say, "Yeah." And they'll say, "Keep up the good work," or "I listen," or something encouraging. I wouldn't expect that as much in Europe, but it happens, at least once when I'm over there. And it's kind of encouraging to know that, people are listening, and even bishops and people in the hierarchy. I'm sure there's other bishops who hate my guts, but there it is.
We know who they are, Taylor. So, and that's great to hear for our audience, I think, to hear as well, because it's encouraging to think that there are goodies out there, as well as we hear about the baddies, and we usually talk about the baddies quite a lot, don't we? But there are some goodies. Have you got a list of people that you think are particularly, and Strickland, obviously? We were in Chicago a couple of years ago, and we were asked to talk on a radio station, and this was one of the questions that we were sort of asked is, what do you do when the bishops are so bad and all that? And I think I stood up and just said, well, look, but you all know that, the shepherd, we all know the voice of the shepherd, and you can all list them off. And we started off, everyone had the same list of American bishops, Cordileone, Strickland, we know who the good ones are. Would you say that you've got a solid list of people who are on side?
I don't have a solid list, and I would be reticent to give a list just because people would make it hey, this is Taylor Marshall's list, and I don't want to be that kind of a gatekeeper or something. But yeah, I mean, we, like you said, the sheep can hear the voice of the shepherd, of course, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but also, those bishops and priests and deacons and monastics who are also listening to the voice of the shepherd, and we know who they are, and we know who they aren't. It's become manifest year after year, and as the unspoken schism widens, it's clear, which members of the hierarchy are moving which way.
One of the best things, I think, about the Francis Pontificate is the fact that all the scum has floated to the surface now. No one's hiding, are they? We know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Newman or someone else that was very observant about the patristic era and the sequence of heresies over time. I think it was Newman, but I'm going to defer to those of you in Great Britain on that. And he said that in all the great heretical controversies and battles, you had about 10 or 20% that were stridently Orthodox. Your Athanasius, your St. Basil the Great, your St. Gregory Nyssa, St. Gregory Nazianzus, St. John Chrysostom, Augustine. And then you had 10 to 20% who were stridently heretical. And then in the middle was like 60 to 80% who didn't have conviction. And when the heretics were winning the day, they sort of leaned towards them and sort of buddied with them during these false synods and councils. And then when the Orthodox finally did win after they'd been exiled and martyred and persecuted and detracted, they would say, well, we were always with Athanasius, of course. We were always with, we are always against the Nestorians or the Monophysites. And that's kind of the story of our day, is I think they're stridently Orthodox and stridently heretical, but the big majority in the middle are sort of just looking around and trying to figure out what's going on. And when Orthodoxy wins the day, we probably can expect that big group in the middle to be, oh yeah, we were always with you on that. Yes, we're always with you.
I was just going to say one of the really interesting things, because obviously we share this with Gavin, but like a lot of the guys who I know who've come over, it's a beautiful journey from sort of, I never know what to call it. What do I call it, Gavin? Is it Anglicanism? Yeah, heresy, yeah. Towards the light. No, but it's a kind of an ongoing journey towards orthodoxy, isn't it? And it draws you to deeper and deeper orthodoxy. And that seems to be a real trend with guys who've come from Anglicanism, in my experience. And do you think that's because you're so committed to truth? If you've made that massive decision in your life and taken your family out of, what I know for Gavin was a very comfortable, well-respected sort of environment into it's a bit of chaos. All right, it's real chaos. It's not fake chaos, but it's pretty chaotic, the Catholic Church, isn't it? And there are lots of factions, as we're seeing now. So do you think that's part of the journey, that journey towards orthodoxy? It's because it costs you so much, sort of thing.
Well, I think the more something costs, the more you study and wrestle with yourself on whether you want to purchase it. Whether that's a large piece of property, a vehicle, a diamond, a gem, a ring. When you see a high price tag, before you really have to spend some time. If it's just buying a piece of aluminum or a plastic toy, you don't consider it much at all. So the fact that the price tag is so high, and we're talking about the pearl of great price, means that those who made the purchase didn't do it willy-nilly. They spent a lot of time, a lot of effort weighing the cost. And when they discovered the pearl of great price was in that field, they sell everything and they buy the field. But you only make that big of a decision if you've done your research. And I think you mentioned Anglicans. Are all of y'all former Anglicans?
Just Gavin.
We're cradle Catholics. Catherine fell away from the faith. And Gavin's story.
But having been an Anglican myself and an Anglican cleric, of all the Protestants, Anglicans are, or mostly are, perhaps the most anti-Catholic Protestant group there is, which a lot of people in America would listen to this and say, oh no, they're very close to Catholicism, or oh no, the Southern Baptists, they think they worship Mary and the Pope and all these horrible things. But as an Anglican, you're not just studying scripture, you're also tapped in very much to liturgy, church councils. So you're very close to Rome. And so what's required to maintain that distance is, to use a word that Pope Francis likes to use, there's a rigidity there. That you have to keep your arms fully extended and locked because you're constantly being pulled in to Catholicism. You're constantly being pulled over to Rome. And so those that never cross the Tiber from Anglicanism, I have found, are the most anti-Roman, the most anti-papal, the most anti-Catholic, because, Pharaoh had a stiff neck, but they have stiff arms because they're just trying with all their strength to stop from being pushed into the Tiber River. Do you agree with that, Gavin Ashenden?
I do. I think that's right. One of the problems is that Anglicans consider themselves first-class Catholics. In other words, they say we have our roots right back in the patristic era. They don't, but they say they do. And then they say, well, when we got the opportunity, we tidied ourselves up. So we have the best of both worlds. And of course, it's a really seriously bad misreading of scripture. And worse than that, within the Church of England, there's this whole Erastian pomposity, which comes from close association with the state. So there's a degree in which they talk themselves into this narrative. And then if they were to question the narrative at all, everything falls to pieces very quickly. And so part of the rigidity you've described so well is to avoid questioning any of the narrative. I mean, one of the people ask me why I'm so cross with Anglicanism. And the answer is because having reread history, having reread the patristics, reread theology, I can't believe what a contrick it was and how it was I managed to be held by it for such a long time. And the cleverer you think you are, the more cross you are about having been taken in by it. So I think what you said is exactly right. And it's very, and I just want to say that one of the other answers to Mark's question is, why do we put so much into it? Taylor's right. It takes you 10 years and you give up everything for it. But the other thing is, we've tasted the shit. And I'm using that language deliberately. We've tasted the corruption, the detritus, the all the heresies that are trying to make their way into the Catholic Church. We've tasted, we've smelt them, we've played with them, we've seen the corruption of them work through the Church of England. And if you've been in a burning building and you've been burnt and you've got the scars to prove it, and other people start throwing petrol around and matches, you say, just don't do this. And that's one of the reasons why we know what we're talking about. We've been there.
Dr. Taylor, I wanted to ask you, Gavin mentioned the state there. We are currently in a real time of turmoil and chaos over here in the UK. You've got the upcoming elections and we follow that reasonably closely from here. And that's been quite controversial. We know that there's the Trump-Vance ticket, which is something we've been following with Vance's Catholicism, conversion to Catholicism. We've been very interested in. But there is a lot of controversy, and we have found it quite difficult to navigate the political sphere from a Catholic's perspective. And it seems that whatever we say, people are, some people are happy, some people are angry. And I think all we can do really is to be Christ-centered. How do you navigate commentary on politics, especially given the hot button issues and the heat that surrounds the election over there upcoming in November?
I'll have to give a little bit of history about myself. So in the last election cycle 4 years ago, Donald Trump very much wanted to win the Catholic vote away from Joe Biden, who professes to be a Catholic. That was a big part of the Republican strategy 4 years ago. And they did something interesting. Instead of choosing sort of your mainstream, United States bishop genre of faces and names, they reached out and got, very pro-life, very traditional Catholics like myself, and added them to the campaign Catholics for Trump. And they asked me, would I be a part of it? I was a little unsure about taking a step into politics, but I agreed. And part of it was just discussing, legal immigration and mainly the pro-life position. And thanks be to God, under Trump, judges were appointed. Roe v. Wade, which was our major judicial decision in favor of abortion, was overturned. So that was all a big win. But this time around, about a year ago, I began to discern, just from my friends connected to American politics and to Trump. And I was at Mar-a-Lago a year or so ago. Can't quite recall when it was, but I started to discern that this time around, Trump and the Republicans in general were not going to seek that Catholic, pro-life, traditional, hardcore, pro-family agenda. And that bothered me. And I was like, I'm not going to be involved. If it's not that, I'm not going to be involved. And so far, I haven't been involved because I think Trump is worried that he needs to win the middle. He needs to win women, and he needs to win minorities. And so he is a lot softer on all the issues that perhaps would move them away. And so my opinion is that his ticket is weaker for people like me 4 years later. I don't like that. And people get mad at me if I say that, but it's like, why can't I say that? Right? It's not representing me as a voter. I understand exactly what he's doing politically. And so I think the selection of J.D. Vance is in line with that. J.D. Vance is a Catholic. He tends to be a conservative Catholic. He's a convert. He's a recent Catholic. And from what I know about Trump, I suspect he thought, well, I'll just make J.D. Vance a Catholic, my VP. That'll check box the Catholics, and then I can move on and go towards the people in the middle, the women and the minorities. But I think generally Catholics in America are concerned that J.D. Vance, by certain statements he said about the abortion pills, about abortion, unnatural marriage, some things like that, that he's just going to kind of go along and not press for the Catholic position, which makes people on the traditional right uncomfortable, because if we can't give a free pass to Joe Biden and JFK and Nancy Pelosi, then we can't give a free pass to J.D. Vance either. And so that brings that into the public debate as well. So it is a very complicated knot that no one has untied. And some people on the right say, well, J.D. Vance will just switcheroo and become really Orthodox Catholic once he gets into power. But that's not a deal I could do as a Catholic. And then we've seen time and time again in America where we've had politicians who are rah, pro-life. They get elected. It's over. They don't do anything. So that's my concern. That you asked me about what Americans are feeling. I can't speak to all that, but that's probably just my own personal biographical response to what's going on for traditional Catholics. It's complicated, and I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball here, and I don't know who's going to win this one.
But you can't.
I really liked your response. No, that's the problem.
What?
You can't vote for the other lot, he said.
No, of course not. Of course not. But, I'll tell you, 4 years ago, and I consider myself pretty well connected with Catholics, lay and clerical. 4 years ago, all the Catholics were 100%, not all, 90 something, rah, rah, rah. Trump's our guy. We got to get Trump in. This time, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he'll lose. It just means that the Catholic base is not as fired up as it was 4 years ago.
What I really liked about your answer was that I think too often we do that. We pin our colours to a mast that is worldly or hope to find salvation in politics or something. And, I remember when a lot of conservative types were happy when Dave Rubin spoke against transgender ideology and some of the woke stuff. And then when he came out and said that he was going to have a surrogate child with his partner, they felt awkward because they'd already pinned their support for him. And I think what's very courageous about what you said, and I think as Catholic podcasters, we have to be brave enough to say, even if someone seems like they're speaking a message that Catholics can accept today, if that changes, we have to have the courage to say, then we won't align ourselves with the person just because they're the person. So I think that takes bravery, and agree with you there.
I loved it when you did that, Taylor. I have to say that really, because I'm friends with a big group of Americans, and we're often talking about this. I think a few of them might be watching, and because I find it really difficult to sort of navigate that. I think that there are lots of problems with Trump, but at the same time acknowledge that in a binary choice, what else are you going to do? And it's never going to be perfect, is it? So you've got to go with the least worst option in a lot of respects.
And to keep the pressure on as a Catholic pro-life voice, not to say, well, we've got this choice of two evils, let's go with this one. Don't be satisfied and keep pushing, because if he sees Catholics saying this isn't good enough, then that might, influence as well.
Catherine, I'm so glad you said that, because we can push and pressure and hold fire under the feet, not only of politicians, but also of bishops. Still love them, still promote them, still be behind them, but also trying to move the Overton window and trying to move the debate towards us and saying, don't just count on us as if take us for granted. Listen to, because like you said, they could be pushed, and they need to be pushed. And there's other voices on our own camps that are like, shut up, be quiet. You're going to ruin things. It's like, no, we're being careful here. These things have to be said. These things have to be said, and there needs to be pressure, even on people who we're going to vote for, or even people who we share the same convictions with.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. I'm going to move to some questions that have come in from our members who are joining us now. And for our last half hour, I'll begin with one that's come. You've touched on it a little bit, but perhaps more specifically, how do Catholics in the US, as far as you can tell, perceive Catholics in the UK? Is the history of Catholicism here in England widely understood, do you think, across the pond?
I think it is, because, America is this Anglo-Saxon thing, and it is still very waspy in ways, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. And those who become Catholic in America, I think, have a similar experience to those who become Catholic in England, in that we are becoming Catholic against the social mores, against what is accepted and customary. And so I think we have that in common. We in America very much know that England is Protestant, and very Protestant, though historically not. So, and then there's also, most converts have encountered Newman in America, and he's very important, I think, for that pathway of conversion to Catholicism from Protestantism. And so I think there's a connection there. Also, I think a lot of converts are familiar with Manning, and then, we could go on and talk about G.K. Chesterton and Belloc. So there's a lot of the paving of the way for Protestants in the English language towards Catholicism is English. So I think there definitely is an awareness and a connection, and then also a shared experience of rebelling against what is culturally acceptable to be a Catholic.
Thank you. Well, Peter, I hope that answers your question. He also said G.K. Chesterton appears to be more appreciated by the Americans than us. I mean, it is odd, isn't it? But that we definitely found that, didn't we, guys, when we spent time in the US and visited the Chesterton network as well of schools.
Yep.
We have a question from Leonie here. First of all, thank you, Dr. Taylor Marshall, for making the time for Catholic Unscripted and their members. How best can Orthodox Catholics be shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves in these times?
Well, I think our Lord, when he says that, he's calling us to become virtuous. And in particular, one of the 4 cardinal virtues is prudence. And in America, there is more, because of Protestantism and the charismatic movement and the Baptist church and altar calls, there's more of an enthusiasm or more of a mystical, this is what's in my heart. God's telling me this in my heart, so I have to do this. But in our Catholic tradition, and even Dante, he talks about I think it's in the Purgatory, there's a procession of the virtues. Prudence is the leader. Prudence is the most important. Thomas Aquinas says prudence is the most important. And we have to be shrewd. We have to be prudent. We have to make right decisions. And prudence is a subset of wisdom. That is looking out into the world, seeing the order, and then conforming ourselves to that order to make a particular right decision. And my father always told me success is 1,000 good decisions. And that's where we are now. Personally, I believe in America, and it looks like over the last few days, the UK too, our political situation is very dire. It's very bad. I think our politicians have sold us out. I don't think voting harder for the next 4 years is going to change much over the next 4 to 10 years. So that means that we need to be shrewd, we need to be prudent, and we need to be making 1,000 good decisions. That has to do with where you go to Mass, who your children do their confessions with. Do you pray the rosary every day? Where do you live? Do you have land? Do you live in the city? Do you live in the country? All of these, there's 1,000 of these questions, and we need to be shrewd. We need to be prudent to order our lives, because the status in the church and the status in the political realm for our 2 countries is pretty confusing and pretty chaotic now. And so that means that we have to become much more local, much more communal, focused on our family, our friends, our own life, and our own decisions, because the higher we go, the less control we have.
To what extent do you think that is a result of this move to the centre, Taylor? You see it in America as well now? You just outlined it really clearly with what's going on with Trump. He's moving back towards the centre. And obviously where the whole of Europe has moved right, if you're watching European politics, we've just taken a move to the left, as it would appear, but that's not really what's happened. What's happened is that the Conservative Party got it so wrong that everyone was so fed up with them that they had to vote for someone else. And, there you go. We got this joker. But ultimately what we've got, what in both of our countries, is the blob, isn't it? Is we've got this centrist sort of ideology, and you can see the results of it in the voting demographic, is that it just purely leads to apathy and to civil unrest, because people feel that it doesn't matter what way they vote, their political affiliation makes no difference because everyone's the same. Would you agree that's what's going on over there?
I agree, but I think since the first 2 world wars, we've been on a first gradual downward spiral, but now a very steep downward spiral where the metaphysical reality, the concrete reality underneath us that held everything up, is being jackhammered. So that metaphysical realities such as male, female, human life, even in the church, what is the ontological priesthood?
Mm.
You know, what is transubstantiation? All these things that were just engraved in our culture, in our faith, are all under attack, all at the same time. And unfortunately, that's all happening, maybe by design, with a democracy that's leading towards, you know, the populace voting to empty the treasury for their own good. So it's all based on carnality, and it's all based on denying philosophical and metaphysical reality. So we're moving away from logos, we're moving towards chaos. And in America, I wish I could say it's moving towards the center, but I think if you really studied marriage rates, birth rates, and basic convictions and beliefs that people have, such as, do you believe in God? Do you believe in Christ? Do you believe in heaven and hell? I think we have moved hard left in America over 10, 20 years, very quickly. I don't know what those numbers are in the UK, but I imagine they might be worse. I don't know. Do you agree?
Yeah, Gavin, I'd like to bring you in. Would you comment?
Yes, I think I agree with Taylor, and I want to go much farther than Mark. I don't think there's any centrism at all. There's been a huge move to the left. Taylor's quite right. I mean, there are two demonic or oppositional forces that we face culturally there: Islam and some form of Marxism, cultural, political. But there's been an enormous shift to the left. And I think what you described in terms of Europe going right is not Europe going right at all. It's people waking up to it and saying, well, wait a minute, we object. We don't want to do this. Excuse us, we'd like to get off, or we'd like to slow the thing down. Now, they're not capable of doing that. There are no right-wing parties that have reconditioned the political contract with their people. All you've simply got is a degree of protest going on. And what's happening in our country is that the protest was so silenced, so controlled, so castrated, that it spilled out onto the streets. But despite what people say, it's without leadership. It's simply grotesque frustration. And the question then comes, what can Catholics do? I mean, earlier on, Mark said you can't vote for the other lot. And one of the big shifts that's happened for us is it used to be 20 or 30 years ago, traditional Christians tried to avoid getting involved in politics because only progressive Christians got involved in politics. And they did it by adopting progressive political positions. The thing that's caused us such difficulty now is if you're a traditional Christian, you're forced to be politically towards the right. And I've had lots of friends telling me, you know, we liked it when you did spirituality. We don't like it now you've got into politics. To which my response is, I didn't get into politics. Politics came after me. And what I'm doing is resisting this move to the left. That makes me look political, but it's not me. It's the political carnivorousness that's coming after Christianity. And I think one of the things that we failed to do is to, slightly neutered by this don't become political, is we failed to warn people about the danger of the left that Taylor just described. It's very powerful in America. It's even more powerful in Europe. And over the next 10 years, that's what's going to come after Christianity, both in terms of removing our civil rights from us and silencing us. And I think one of the things we have to do as a church is to find ways of being as vocal as possible. And for that, because we need bishops, and just at that time, the bishops are silent, so they get us instead. I'm
not sure. Can I just temper that, though, with this? Perhaps you'll bear with me, Gavin, and I'm sure we agree on this, but it's like, it's not so much the left. I don't know that you'd call it the left. Certainly, I was listening to the new appointment of the running mate for Kamala Harris this afternoon, and it's rather than left, I think it's progressive, and it's more obviously progressive in the US. Certainly, part of the thing that we've seen going on over here is an abandonment of the left, the traditional left, in terms of supporting the working man and all that element to the leftist ideology. And when you look at the Conservatives now having discussions about how they're going to sort out politics, in that they're talking about a move to the centre, which, you know, like really is the opposite of what the people are calling for. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, if you're asking me very quickly before Taylor comes in, no, I don't think I would. I understand you're saying that the old-fashioned left is the proletariat versus the bosses, but that progressive movement is just another is a modified, a modulated form of leftism. They're all, it's the same rationalistic, materialistic communitarianism that doesn't like Christianity. It's expressing itself culturally instead of economically. So I don't see that for us as any. You're right. There's been a move from the economic to the cultural, but I don't see that as changing any of its leftishness.
You'll know. You two will know, and Taylor won't. Not knowing me, but I would always say that to ignore left and right to some extent, and to look at the impact of lost femininity, because I think actually this loss of femininity you can trace a lot of the problems today, and by that I don't just mean woman, but I mean the idea of that invisible pillar that gives integrity to all that is visible. So all that we're seeing in the chaos at the moment, the chaos on our streets, the technological advancements, the progression, it's all do, see, watch. There's no recognition of the space and the sacred and the reverent that we've lost sight of. And we can talk about going onto the streets and pushing back against the secular progressive ideology and hold up placards. But ultimately, as long as our churches are empty, as long as we don't kneel before our blessed Lord, and as long as we don't have space and recognise the sacredness of space and the feminine, then I think it's very, very difficult to look at political solutions to the problem. So that's a contribution I always come back to, I suppose, as a woman.
And I quite agree with you, Catherine. And we mentioned previously the destruction or the denial of metaphysical realities like male and female. And when you begin to erode those definitions and those metaphysical realities, Scripture says women are the weaker vessel, which is not a pejorative, but which is going to suffer more quickly and more severely. It is the female. That's precisely what we've had. Even though we have all these girl bosses and all this women power and all that, women and their happiness and their satisfaction and in all these different levels, they're freer and more liberated than they've ever been, and they're more miserable than they've ever been. And that is, again, a religious, theological, philosophical reality that is spilling out into the public space. And to go back to what Gavin and Mark were discussing there, in the 80s and 90s in the United States, you had a very strong middle class, and you had a very strong, I think, middle group of people who would maybe, vote Republican one year and Democrat the other, and, based on, the unions and all that. But now in America, I think it is much more radical. You have your gods, your guns, your religion, your free speech, which is very much more of a rural country understanding. And then you have your trans, abortion, Marxist, communist, open immigration groups. They're more in the cities. And there's not a lot of people. I don't meet, and of course I live in Texas, that's different, but I don't meet a lot of people who are like, yeah, I voted, Democrat 4 years ago, and now I'm thinking Republican. It seems people are pretty deeply ingrained. And you look at the states, because in America we have the Electoral College. We vote by state for president. And there are swing states, there's 7 to 15 swing states, but the reason they're swing states is all the other states are usually what they are. They're red or they're blue. Over time, they change, like Colorado. But I don't think that there's a growing middle of centrists. And I think that is personally, I think that is a big mistake that Trump is making right now. Instead of firing up his base like he did the past 8 years and getting everybody fired up, he's going after the center. And I don't know if he can win by doing that. His advisors are telling him.
Reagan didn't win from the centre. Thatcher didn't win from the centre. You've got to have a challenge, an ideology. You've got to have an idea that challenges the problems that we see in society and comes up with some sort of answer, haven't you? And
in America, Barack Obama didn't win from the middle. You get these charismatic people who capture the moment. They capture the ethos. They pull people towards them. And Marxists have done a better job of that in Western countries than sadly Christians have in capturing the heart for a movement or being in something bigger than yourself. That they're very good at that. We have not been
Free
good
money,
at that.
Taylor. That's what it is.
That is a big part of it. Free money it gets people excited. Most certainly. Yeah.
I'm sure I think we're agreed you don't do it from the centre. But I wanted to go back to what Catherine said, because although she presented it as issues of dealing with lost femininity and anti-feminism, what you're really doing, Catherine, is bringing us back to the metaphysics, to the Catholic consciousness, to the Catholic worldview. And it's very easy when we're talking about agreeing and disagreeing about our political finesses to lose the fact that there are no political solutions. Some political presentations are more dangerous than others, but the only solution is the restitution of the Catholic mind and heart. And in a sense, that's what we ought to be bringing to the political process and the political conversation, is this radical transformation of mind, so that we deal with Christian gospel orthodox categories of anthropology and theology, and for those are what transform humanity. And I think that's the most difficult thing to do at the moment, because there are so many people who are outside the immediate influence of Catholic conversation or Catholic friends. There's this big gap, and I think that's one of the reasons why our podcasts are so important, because there's some chance at any rate that if we present ourselves, whether it's by thumbnail or accessible conversation, that we may catch people who are interested and want to find out. But only a Catholic transformation of heart and mind is going to do anything to stop this decay that Taylor described as taking place over the last 100 years.
And people have been so propagandized as well, haven't they, over the decades. Mark, do go on, but I was really enjoying the fact that Gavin gave me a perfect in for one of the next questions. I'm going to have to come back. No. Sorry, I thought, what a segue that is. Gavin started talking about the podcasts as a way to maybe reach people. Somebody's just messaged in to ask Taylor, how do we discern? Because you spoke about when you began, there weren't many people online doing what you were doing, and now there's a plethora of them, us included. How do people discern the best podcasts to listen to as Catholics who feel unfed and isolated, as so many people who contact us say they feel?
Well, there's no index of forbidden podcasts that I know of. Maybe I'd be put on it. I don't know.
Maybe we should draft one.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. I've said it often. We should not be doing this. There should be 24 amazing podcasts led by bishops and cardinals who are gifted teachers, preachers, who I can read Latin, but I can't speak Latin. I've been to Latin camps where we communicate in Latin, but we're not doing what they used to do in the 1920s. There should be a intelligentsia, a class in the church of bishops and priests who are Orthodox, loving, on fire for Christ, amazing catechists and teachers who are doing this so well that for people like us to turn on our webcams and start talking, people would just laugh us out. We shouldn't be here. We have had talent pools in the history of the church who did these sort of things. And, I wish I could just go back out and, I was working on a cattle fence just before I came on here with my cows. I should be out with my cows as a little agrarian man. I shouldn't be on here having to explain Thomas Aquinas to a million people, or, what is substance and accidents, and how do you memorize the 7 deadly sins? And these are the things I do. It needs to be done, and I'm happy to do it. But we need the clergy to do it. We need the monastics to do it. But in the meantime, the most important thing that you can do is begin. We talked about prudence and small decisions. Recatechize yourself. Get the Catechism of Pius X. In America, we have a great catechism called the Baltimore Catechism, which is for 7-year-old children. I think in England you have the Penny Catechism. Is that still a thing? Yeah.
No, it's not still a thing, sadly.
Well, we don't use it, but we still do.
We still
Yes.
have it. Yeah, we still use it with our children, but it's not a
You
thing.
need to read those things. You need to read the Catechism of the Council of Trent. These are not heroic deeds. These are things that you can do on a couple Saturdays. It's not hard to do. And reframe and rediscover what it is to be a Catholic. What is it to be a Christian? And then I think podcasts are just supplements for that. And I think most people need, some of my most popular podcasts are How to Pray the Rosary, How to Pray the Our Father in Latin, What is Gnosticism and How to Avoid It, 10 differences between Protestants and Catholics. My most popular content, people say, oh, Taylor Marshall's up talking about Pope Francis again. I mean, that's a very small thing that I do. The main thing that people want to hear is catechesis. Do we worship Mary? How do we understand Mary? What is the Immaculate Conception? Those are popular videos. Those are the ones that people come to year after year after year that I'm producing. And so I think you have to discern when you listen to podcasts, is this making me grow closer to Christ? Is it conforming with the basic catechesis, Orthodox traditional basic catechesis, and Orthodox traditional piety? That's the main criterion. Is there anything else?
That, because this is exactly like I've had arguments with priests for years and years. I used to just write a blog before we started doing this and get everyone into used to get into loads of trouble with a bishop and everything. And I always used to say exactly what you just said. Look, if you were doing your job, I wouldn't be doing it. If you were calling it out, if you were teaching the faith, then there would be absolutely no need for this. So I think you absolutely nailed it on the head there. The other thing I wanted to say was, that we've got all this pressure from like the progressive pressure from tradition, from progressives in the church as well as in political terms, and like Traditionis Custodes and all this stuff. That's put a lot of pressure on faithful Catholics, from what I can see, to leave, to go to Orthodoxy. It's like, oh, what's the next step along? What do you think about that? And why shouldn't they do that? And why isn't the grass greener? And why should we stay Catholic?
I think it's different in America than in England in that sense. I remember going to Oxford maybe 15, 20 years ago and just hanging out with students and professors. And for them, like, Greek and Russian Orthodoxy was so cool. I mean, like, everyone there just seemed to be so into it. Everything was Byzantine and they were just really into all that. In America, Orthodoxy is still very ethnic. There's a Romanian church less than a mile from my house. I know the priest there. But it's still very ethnic. It's very Romanian. In America, for traditional Catholics, they go sedevacantists. That's what I've noticed. I've only known I've known two very strong Catholics who have left Catholicism for Orthodoxy, and one has come back to traditional Catholicism. One is still Orthodox. So
thanks be to God.
I think it's more rare in America. What you see is sedevacantism in the United States of America. So, and I think the answer to this is the controversy since 1958, the Second Vatican Council, the debates regarding Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre up into 1988, the sort of, I guess, keeping the status quo under Benedict XVI with, we have the ordinary and extraordinary form, and then everything being blown to smithereens under Pope Francis. All of these things, kind of like going back to who should be running podcasts, are nothing that I can pontificate, or Gavin or Mark or Catherine. None of us can pontificate on these things or make any binding calls that are canonical on any of the baptized lay faithful. Nothing. I can write books, I can write blogs, I can write articles, and I can make podcasts. But I have no juridical care of souls whatsoever. And so my message that I repeat over and over is pray the rosary every day, try to find a traditional Latin Mass, get yourself a traditional catechesis. And when it comes to the questions of sedevacantism, sedeprivationism, and these high-level questions, we are not, we were not meant to make those decisions, and we're probably not capable of them. And I really believe a future pope, I mean, I do believe a future pope is going to declare Francis anathema. I know people are like, whoa, you just said that. But it's been so much chaos, so much confusion, so many people leaving the faith. And then just, things like Pachamama and ambiguous statements and blessing of same-sex couples, not unions or marriages, but couples is the language. But again, I don't spend any moments of the day whatsoever working on that, considering that, figuring that out. But I do pray my rosary every day, and I do stop and pray the Angelus, and I read my Bible every day and read devotional literature and try to stop committing venial sins and live the life of a Catholic. And I really think that's the solution. And that's what, people always say, you talk about hard things, but when I meet you in real life, you're like really happy and joyful. And I am, because I'm trying to live the Catholic life. Rejoice. Again, I say rejoice in Christ. That's what we have to do. And I think just like with politics, with the church, if you're constantly dwelling upon the drama and the controversies, I think we do need to look at them and discuss them. But your gaze is not towards the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Our Lady, St. Joseph, St. John the Baptist, and the angels and the saints. Yeah, I mean, that's a black pill. You're going to be depressed.
Catherine, can I just ask you for an extension of that question? Because that's so interesting. Taylor, if you're right, and we have an Orthodox Pope who declares Francis anathema, pray God that happens. Is there a way of looking at the Francis pontificate that allows us to see some good coming out of it? To my mind, one of the, a lot of people have said, what a dreadful time to become a Catholic, how hard for you? And the answer is, yes, that's true. But one of the things I've seen is that so many of the errors, Mark talked about the scum coming to the surface, so many of the errors of the last 50 years have been embodied in Francis. And in a sense, it seems to me it's provided a purgation of the church, because all this stuff has come to the top. We see it being promulgated. We know what its effect is. But the $64,000 question is that going to be the future, or will it be declared anathema? If it's going to be declared anathema, everything is okay. This was just a period of purgation. So I think I'd like to ask you just to reflect on that and articulate it better than I could, and perhaps give some more confidence about the anathema solution. Because if that's what's going to happen, it's all fine.
Well, we know it's happened before. The reason I feel certain that it'll happen again is because history, may not repeat itself, but it echoes. And we've had situations like this before. And I'm speaking primarily of Pope Honorius, who was not himself a formal heretic, but he did not, I think Pope Leo, who is a saint, Pope Leo II, said that he did not keep the apostolic see pure. In other words, there was a privation in what he did. Yeah, we've had all kinds of papal controversies in the past, and there's been I'm not saying Francis is an anti-pope, but there have been about on average, 2 anti-popes per century. So we're certainly due for some papal controversy, if you're looking at the trends. But can good come from it? God always brings about good from evil for those whom he loves, as Paul says in Romans. So it always happens. And, even the people of Abraham being enslaved in Egypt, God brought about tremendous good. Even the Babylonian exile, God brought about tremendous good. Even the Son of God dying on the cross, he brings about profound good. So I have no doubt about that. And again, the 4 of us could die from a car wreck or a heart attack or cancer or martyrdom within the next 7 days. The most important thing is that you keep your soul pure and that you have faith, hope, and love towards Jesus Christ, and you're living as a true disciple, a true Christian, a true Catholic. This is what's going to give you joy, and this is what's ultimately going to give you the beatific vision through grace. So just major on those things. It just makes sense. Major on those things, and all will be well.
Very good. Thank you.
I think that's such a wonderful point to end. I know your time is limited, Dr. Taylor, and we're coming up to our hour with you, but I found that just a beautiful way to end, especially in these times, which are, we see so much chaos around us, that the answers that we may be tempted to be drawn to if they're not step up our devotion, our prayer life, our growth in holiness and striving for holiness all the time, then they're false answers and they won't feed us. They won't give us what we're looking for. So I know from looking at the comments, our members are really appreciative of you coming and speaking with us today. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Great to have you here. Thanks for making the time. So lots of really positive comments. And I've spoken before about how I've watched you. I watched you dialogue with someone for over an hour about the church's teaching on human sexuality and about some of those hot button issues about homosexuality and transgender issues. And you did it with such charity, such grace and such love that I think we're aware that when you're in the podcast world, sometimes people throw things at you and accuse you of things. But I certainly want to thank you, and I'm sure Mark and Gavin will echo what I'm saying, that for the work that you do and the truth that you share with charity. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I enjoy Catholic Unscripted. Keep up your good work, and it's good to have friends across the pond.
Cheers, Taylor.
Bless you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, for now, thank you for watching. Do please check out CatholicUnscripted.com as well as Dr. Taylor Marshall's podcast, which you can find on YouTube, and his website, taylormarshall.com, I guess, is it?
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for watching. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashenden, and
I'm Taylor Marshall.
That's it.
I like that.